All right, what's up, ladies and gentlemen, for another open live Q&A. My name is Mr. McLogan, and I am here to answer your questions. I apologize for those of you that were on that other stream. I didn't have some of my components set up correctly, and so I wanted to make sure it's a little back-end stuff. So you'll probably be like, what were you trying to do? It's just some small back-end stuff that I wanted to make sure that I had correct going into this live stream. So if you do have a question, feel free to put it down inside the chat, and I'll be more than happy to answer, see what I can do to be able to help you guys out. If you have a math question that you'd like for me to do, like a math problem, then you can go and submit that at brianmclogan.com/Q&A, and I will kind of keep tabs of that form, and I'll try to do my best to be able to answer those questions. I'm not a math genius. I've taught math for 14 years, as well as a lot of times online, but I always like to make sure that I can't always do every single question. Sometimes I have to go back and review some stuff just to make sure I'm remembering what everything is, that, or at least the explanation from, that it's going to be the perfect or the best for you guys. So if you have any math questions or just anything in general, feel free to put it down below and I'll try to do my best to get to you guys. Let me go and get that chat back up. There we go. Got that all going through. Well, if you have a specific question on slopes, then let me know exactly what you'd like me to talk about. And then I'll probably get on my whiteboard here after I answer some of your guys' questions, and then I can go through them on there. So how to make slopes easier? Well, I kind of need a little bit more context of what you're having trouble with. Whenever I'm doing a private tutoring session, one of the reasons why I like private tutoring is I can always help students. Like, I can ask questions, and I know it might be simple, like, oh, we'll just re-explain this or reteach slope. Well, it's different. Like if I was in Algebra 1 class, we might spend like a whole day or multiple days talking about slope. And so just to condense that down to like 1 or 2 minutes, I want to make sure I have enough context of seeing what you understand, what is really the kind of difficult thing. So you can always submit questions at brianmclogan.com/Q&A. But if you have something additional that you want to add into there, then I'll be happy to address it on there as well. Right Wing Duck, hello. Hey, Zori, good to have you on. How to rate change in a graph, please? Well, that's rate of change and a slope on the graph. That is going to be very good. Fatimia, hello. Grace says the hypotenuse of a right triangle is 1 more than twice the length of the shortest leg. The second leg is 1 less than twice the length of the shorter leg. What is the length of each side? So what you need to do in this case is you need to create a relationship between all of the sides. And then from there, this actually looks like a good problem. Actually, if you can submit this at brianmclogan.com/Q&A, I'll probably have to just work it out because whenever I do a live stream, it's kind of like, I always seem to like confuse myself. It's like me being in front of the classroom again and like talking my way through it, but submit that. And I think that's a really, really good question. But anyways, once you have a algebraic relationship with each side based on that formula that you have, then you know it's a right triangle. So therefore you can create the relationship using the Pythagorean theorem. Leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. Then you can just go ahead and simplify. It looks like find the length of each side, or the hypotenuse of the second leg. I think that would be the next case. Actually, I'd have to open it up. The length and twice the length of there. Well, then you'd have to be able to solve for L. What is the length of each side? Not sure if that would be, if you'd have fully enough information, you'd have to want to know the length of at least one side to be able to find the length, I believe. Go ahead and submit it in there and I can take a further look at it. I can see why it could be pretty hard. As far as my point, you're only going to have, submit it. I'll go ahead and take a look at it. I'll have to spend a little bit more time thinking through it. Well, hey, Joachim, that's a very interesting name. I don't think I've ever seen that name before. Watch from Philippines at 5 a.m. I love it. Yeah, go ahead and submit them at brianmclogan.com/Q&A, and I'll be more than happy to take a look at it. How do you know which section of graph to shade when graphing inequalities? So the best thing you want to do is just use a test point. And the most popular test point is 0, 0. Now, obviously, if your line or your whatever shape of graph you are graphing goes through that test point, then you don't want to use that because then you're testing actually the graph or the line. But let's pretend that the graph does not go through the line. So let's say you have a graph or line that goes off it, and then you plug in 0, 0. We'll plug 0, 0 into the inequality. If that point makes the inequality true, then all the other points that are below or above that line, like if 0, 0, let's say, is below your linear inequality, your boundary line. And if 0, comma 0 is true, that means all the other points below it are true. Let's say your boundary line is below 0, comma 0. So 0, comma 0 is above. If that point, let's say, is false, then again, all the other points above the boundary line are false. That means all the points below it are going to be true. So a couple different ways. If you have a specific problem, then feel free to go ahead and submit it. And I'll be more than happy to kind of show you step by step on that. Multiple reasons why I stepped away from teaching. Actually, I was just speaking with somebody at a wedding that we had over the weekend. And, one of the biggest reasons I stepped away from the classroom was having our third child. And so it's just very difficult managing a family as well as having, kids. It's just time consuming. And obviously, unfortunately, with teaching, it's not very flexible. I mean, basically, I have to be there with my kids, right, in the classroom. So it's really difficult to take time off. My wife was taking a lot of time off. We had, 2 young girls constantly doing doctor's appointments and whatever else. And so once we had our third, YouTube was doing good enough that I felt like it was just the right time for me to, venture off into my own and just focus on YouTube full time. Now, obviously, there's many, many other things that contributed to that, but I would definitely say family was the number one reason. All right. Let's see if I can type this in. I believe it is. I believe it's also in my description, the brianmclogan.com/Q&A. Let me just double check that still goes in there. Ah, it does. Perfect. Okay. Review the graphs of the systems of inequalities. Find the solution to the system. Again, best if you can submit that to brianmclogan.com/Q&A. But if you don't, I'll try to do my best to go back to it and get to it. The only problem is when you put it into the chat, I'm not doing math problems right now. So if you submit it to brianmclogan.com/Q&A, which I just put into the chat, then when I go back to those problems, I'll have everything on the form and I can go and knock out your problems. Otherwise, I have to kind of go back through the chat. And depending on how long we go through this Q&A kind of forum, it might be difficult for me to be able to get back to your question. So that's why I always recommend, if you have a math question, submit it to brianmclogan.com/Q&A. So therefore, I can make sure I get to all your math. All right. Hopefully, Anatha. And that should be the commutative property of addition. I currently live in Jacksonville, Florida. Let's roll that up a little bit more. Well, awesome, Parker. So happy to be able to help you out. Antha, the symmetrical property. Watching from Senegal. Awesome. I'm struggling with fractions. Too many things to learn. What is the best tip to learn fractions? I never really had to teach fractions from the beginning. I always taught it, and actually I was going through. I never had to teach. I never had to teach fractions really from the beginning, so I don't feel like I have a good direct answer for you in on that. But what I would say for you is, practice makes perfect in the sense of when you struggle with fractions, a lot of times people study with fractions because we kind of I'm talking this from more of an upper level, math background. A lot of times students struggle with fractions because they just haven't had as much experience with them. So I would definitely start with the more basic ones, more basic problems, just to kind of have a general understanding of them, but then make sure you're continually doing them. And I think that's sometimes the problem with our math instruction. Sometimes you'll see is students don't get very familiar with fractions. So then when a problem includes fractions, they're all of a sudden confused or all of a sudden treat it as it's some difficult, crazy problem, which is not really the case, but it is the case in the sense of students are not comfortable with fractions because a lot of the times they just don't have as much experience dealing with them. I think there's a lot of really, really interesting and I'd say possible good benefits with crypto. And it's just going to be interesting to see where the world kind of goes if it finally adopts, the kind of crypto as far as like an exchange, for monetary back and forth exchanges. It'll be interesting. I think right now it's still very heavily on just speculation. But if it starts to be implemented, I think there can be some groundbreaking, changes, in the way that we kind of use money or think about money. I was going to lead up to that because I don't know if I can use math to predict how it goes up. Yeah, there's, I think with just stocks or crypto, I mean, there's a lot of fundamental math. I think that people that trade, on a regular can say there's definitely some patterns that they follow, and that's what pretty much what guides their trading. But then also there's the outside influences, right? The governmental regulations and the what am I thinking of? The mental things of how people are viewing, um, the emotional kind of stake in those. And I think those are some of the variables that sometimes people that are just looking at this from an analytical standpoint, can sometimes not always read in the like a mathematical analysis. So I stay away from all the kind of trading or thinking that I can be able to predict where things are going to go and what things are going to do. I tried it with real estate because I am a realtor, and I remember I was like, oh, I was pretty confident that prices were going to go a certain way, and this was like 5 or 6 years ago. And I remember telling my buyers this, and I was completely wrong. Like things just changed from there. I was like, you know what? From now on, I'm not going to be trying to think that I know what I am doing or that I can predict where the market is going to go. But not to say that that people that put their life and time into doing those things can be very successful with it. What's your tip on probability hard questions? It's my weakness in math tests. I struggle with statistics and probability as well. It was kind of like physics for me. I just didn't enjoy doing any of the problems or the questions. So I didn't really put a lot of time or practice into it. So I just kind of got by, unfortunately. And, I had to take like one statistics class and course in college, and like that was kind of it. So I don't, it just wasn't a strong suit of mine, and it wasn't really something that I really really latched on to really enjoyed very much. Please make a detailed discussion of this greatest rule, finding roots. Maybe mean Descartes. I'm not sure if I know Descartes' rule, but maybe Descartes' rule of science. I'm not sure. Starting rational exponents in math tomorrow. Any tips? Well, obviously, you're going to want to be familiar with the rules of exponents with integers, and you're going to want to have some fractional operations. And just remember, rational exponents are just fancy radicals. That's all they are. So I think a lot of times the math can be easier, but you have to be comfortable with fractions. That's a very, very big important thing. I want to be a math teacher. I feel like such a nerd. Well, that's okay. I think you'll be a great math teacher, and it's a wonderful occupation. I love my time being a math teacher, and I think you can do a lot of great things. So I encourage you to continue following that passion. All right, cool. Well, I will probably get to some math questions on today. We'll see how these questions go through. Well, awesome. Add. Please add. Try to research this topic. I didn't find it. I'm not sure. Durant, I have a quick question about how to actively. Oh, let's go through this again. Sorry. Miss McLogan, I have a quick question on how to actively review before finals start in a couple of weeks. Right now, I'm just going through my notes, and that's not really helpful. Yeah, you got to practice some problems. I think reviewing notes is good things, but I'd go back through your tests, your quizzes, your homework, and start going back through doing the problems. Obviously, problems that you got wrong, go over those, but also do some of the problems you got right. Like go back through the motions. I also think you need to challenge yourself. You're doing what your teacher is providing you. That's great. But, I think also if you can find some problems in the back of the book or some study guides online, something that's going to continue challenging you with those problems, I think that a lot of times I can reinforce that, the learning that you've already had. But yeah, I mean, notes is just a part of it, but I would not recommend just to review notes and say, all right, I'm now ready for my test. Starting SAT soon. Any advice? yeah, just problems, 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 problems. Work on as many SAT example problems as you possibly can. Get a book, go, follow, go on YouTube, go online, like find as many practice exams and practice problems that you can do and do as many as you possibly can. That would be my advice. I think a lot of times when I taught polar coordinates, students enjoyed it. They really liked it. So I don't think it'd be something I'd be too worried about. Obviously, there's sometimes students will get tripped up, on certain elements of it. But I think the overall concept, as long as you have a good foundation of trigonometry and you have a good foundation of like your vectors and understanding those kind of components, then I think polar coordinates you'll be just fine. I'm not really sure. What was I thinking? Oh yeah, well, just the vectors. I think on the really mostly the unit circle from on there. You know what? Actually, that was not part of my pre-calculus thing. I actually never had to teach it. It was in like the first book that we did, and I never taught Calc 2, so we never did it in my calculus class. But yeah, it was part of actually my first calc book or pre-calculus book that I taught out of. But it actually wasn't a requirement for my students to know, and so we always skipped by that section. So we never. It's been way too long since I even done partial decomposition. So unfortunately, I wouldn't probably be the greatest way to be able to help you out on this live stream. Yes. Ennis, if you can go ahead and submit your question to brianmclogan.com/Q&A, it'll be a lot easier for me to help you with Descartes' rule science. I don't know. I would just look them up online. I'm sure there's, I know the Math Sorcerer has a lot of review for textbooks, but I'm not sure if he's done anything like that. But I don't have any specific recommendations. I just, mostly worked on the books that I was provided as a teacher and just work from them there. What's your advice on tackling massive worded questions where the math you're supposed to do isn't very clear and mostly just words? I have a tough time breaking them down. Yeah, I think you're with everybody from on there. And the answer is not very exciting. It just comes into like with a lot of practice, and what I was referring to about fractions, a lot of times people feel like fractions are more difficult than they really are because they just don't get a lot of experience of it. And it's reality of like word problems. We usually have like 1 or 2 word problems at the end of like every section, right? But if you want to get good at word problems, you got to do more than like 1 or 2 from a section. And unfortunately, not all problems are perfectly designed to be word problems. And that's why I feel like sometimes math textbooks make them more difficult than they really need to be. And I know that can be confusing. So I get it. And I agree with you. Unfortunately, you have if you know the tips of breaking them down, the word problems, there's not like a one simple tip I can say to make everything click and make every word problem easier. I think the best advice I can just give you is just to continue working on doing more and more word problems. And you will see a lot more of the patterns and you'll see that they are going to get easier and easier for you over time. Why is sign giving you multiple answers? It is restricted between -90 and 90. Yes, if you just go to my channel, then you type in long division polynomials. I probably have hundreds of problems, maybe not hundreds, but maybe around almost over 50 problems on long division, I bet. Yes, I have a lot of those videos as well. I learned from your YouTube and I can easily study everything very easily. I hope you do grade 11 and 12. Well, I've taught everything from algebra 1 all the way through calculus on my channel. So I have a lot of videos up there. So hopefully you'll find what you need. The easiest way to memorize this is I always just remember, if you can at least remember this one identity, sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. Sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. I remember that from my high school days, even when I started teaching it in high school. Like it was just one of those that I remembered even as a student remembering. Hold on one second. And so, okay. And so I think if you can remember that, then you're off to a good start. And then from there, all you need to do to remember the rest of them is divide everything by sine. And that will give you the second trigonometric identity. And if you take sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1, divide everything by cosine squared, then that will give you the other identity from on there. So how do you get vertical asymptotes of rational functions? So just remember that vertical asymptotes of rational functions are going to be when when they cannot be divided out, and the terms, the values that you're going to place into the denominator are going to make the denominator equal to 0. They are what we call non-removable discontinuities. But if you submit a question to brianmclogan.com/Q&A, I'll be more than happy to go over a problem. Hold on one second. My daughter interrupting my live stream. Hi, Ada. Hi, what's wrong? Okay, can you get Juliana to do it for you, please? Hey, Ada, can you shut the door? Thank you. All right, I am going to open up my thing. I'll get to you guys' questions here in a second, but I did see that you guys submitted some questions. So I do want to get to let's see. Okay. Why is my Zoom open? It's weird. Oh, there we go. I had the wrong one open. All right. Let's move that over there. All right. Now back to your questions. Sorry about that. Do you think kids should stop at Calc AB and not do BC? I heard practically the same. It all depends. I don't feel that in general advice. I feel like everybody is going to be unique in their pathway through mathematics. And so for some people, stopping at AB is perfectly fine. So for some people to have that challenge or to go through the BC curriculum is just fine for them as well. So I don't think there is a one size fits all approach on that. I don't think there's anything I can say to you to ace trigonometry. I think it just comes down to like any course, like do the math problems, do the work. And, when you have questions, make sure you're getting questions and getting help and consistently be reviewing the work over throughout the year. Don't just feel like, oh, I, mastered the unit circle. Like consistently be doing that spiral review throughout the year. And I think you'll be set up for success. Submit the question to brianmclogan.com/Q&A. And I promise you, I'm about to do some math questions. Why do teachers make us learn algebra? Is it very useful in our future? Well, if you're saying, am I going to use algebra when I go to the grocery store? No, I don't really think you are. But if you are going to be taking some different math courses, obviously algebra is like the foundational approach on there. And then also, I think just, the relationships that you learn in algebra gives you a deeper understanding and a way to approach the world that, yes, you can still achieve some of those results without taking an algebra course. And I agree with some of the problems and some of the concepts that we still teach in algebra are maybe not as relevant as they used to be, let's say 50 to 100 years ago. However, I am still a big proponent of students taking algebra, of understanding algebra, because I feel that the stronger you have a mathematical foundation, the more opportunities that are going to be, the more opportunities you have to be able to take advantage of. Basically, like the more doors that are open for you to be able to understand more difficult and complex subjects. But again, you don't have to be successful in life and you could even flunk algebra. Like, I just don't feel like just because you're good at algebra or at calculus, like that means now you're going to be successful. I don't believe that. However, I do believe that the stronger of a math background and foundation that you have, the more opportunities that can provide you. Yes, I think you need to have a decent mathematical background, but it's not like something that needs to be the best. Is there a preference between algebraic approach versus graphing approach throughout Calc 1? I'm not really sure what that question is actually asking. What's the best way to practice conic sections and analytical geometry? I was thinking of ChatGPT practice questions and repeats. Yeah, I mean, I've looked at ChatGPT to like kind of create some questions for me, and like, sometimes they come up with some good questions that I wouldn't have found on my own. I would just rely on textbooks and looking at from resources online. I mean, ChatGPT can provide you with a good like set of questions, but when it comes into giving you a good variety, I think from an educational standpoint, I've found ChatGPT falling short of that standard, in my opinion. So while they can provide some good questions, maybe less than 10, um, I don't think they're always going to hit on the mark as far as giving you the best questions to like really give you a good understanding of, for practice problems in that regard. Well, you are very welcome, Sharif. Um, any thoughts on NCTM? Future teacher, and we are always talking about NCTM in classes, and was curious about what former teachers in the field thought about NCTM. Interesting. So I remember I signed up for NCTM. I'm actually still a member of NCTM. I've never gone through any of the conventions or stuff like that, but I think there's good power, or it's good to have a group that is promoting math education. Um, However, I think I don't know if I have. I remember somebody made a tweet. I remember they were asking. It was something like, is the shift, like all the money that I've been sending to NCTM, is it actually making a difference? Or they weren't providing anything. And I think that's always a good question to kind of like ask, from on there. I think it's good for some of like the research, obviously, that a lot of people, provide and it on the newsletters. But um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm still a member of them, and I think I still support the mission and the vision of NCTM. Um, but I don't feel like beholden to like follow everything that they are doing or that they are going to be a part of, from on that course. And so, yeah, I guess I'll leave it there unless you have any more specific questions on that. Thanks, CJ. In your opinion, what's a good math class to stop at? And honest, I see a lot of kids in AB, Calc AB, stop in pre-calc. Yeah, it all depends on what you want to go into. If you want to go into a math field, continue doing as much math as possible to give you that good foundation. And then when you go into college, like that's okay. I mean, but again, that's not necessarily for everybody. Everybody learns math at different paces. I mean, I got a D in pre-calculus my senior year, and then I went to college and got a math major. So not everybody is going to follow the straight line. So unfortunately, it all depends on where you want to go and where you're at, from in there. Well, you're very welcome, Jolly. I do not have any recommendations from there. Sorry. All right, let's go ahead and get to some of your questions. I see you guys have submitted some questions, so thank you very much. So Sasha, you gave me some probability or tips on probability. I got that, so thank you for sending that in. All right, so you sent that in there. Now I'm gonna have to work through this. So you sent in that question. Thank you, Gracie. Okay, so it looks like you have that equals c squared. The hypotenuse of a right triangle is one more than twice the leg of the shortest leg. The second leg is one less than twice the length of the shortest leg. What is the leg of each side? Okay, well, I think we're good. Let's go ahead and work this one out. Let's see what we get here. I'm just going to take everything that I believe that was maybe the answer that you got. I don't know, Alfie. What was your question? I didn't even see your question. But if you do have one, submit it to brianmclogan.com/Q&A, and I'll go in order that they were submitted. Let's see. Yeah, so when I make videos, I would burn out, and I will say that when I was teaching in school, I think my last or the year before my last year, I only taught pre-calculus and I burnt out. Like I was so sick of doing the same problems over and over again. Obviously, every class gives you a different dynamic and that gives you some variability. But I'm just not, I can't lie. Like I was burned out doing the math. Like by the time at the end of the day, I was just over it, teaching the same material and stuff like that. Inside now, like my studio, I try to vary stuff that I do, and I only try to record for a certain amount of time. Like I can only record for like an hour to 2 hours a day, and then I just get mentally done. So then I just can't do any more from there. I don't know. It all depends on for you. What's the best? Math test about quadratic equations in general. Well, I would just do as many practice problems as possible. You probably have a general idea of what problems are going to be in your test. Practice. There's tons of problems on quadratic equations. Over practice and try to also challenge yourself. All right, so I am now going to share my screen and get into some of the math. So if you have a math question, okay, Alfie's question, I guess I didn't see this. I want to self-teach undergrad mathematics. I want to self-teach undergrad and grad mathematics. Do you have any recommendations? Unfortunately, I do not have any recommendations. So yes, I'm sorry about that. I never had to self-teach, from on there. So I would just maybe kind of look at, maybe check on like Reddit and kind of see if there's some questions on there as far as people that some books or curriculum that you could kind of follow. I just don't have any experience in that to give you a recommendation. All right, Earthen, I'll get your question. But then I'm going to look at the chat and I'm going to go through some of your guys' math questions. And then I'll come back to the chat and answer as many as I can. Hello there. When you said learn geometry and algebra 2 by myself would probably be too much. And even though I'm a fast learner, I want to organize my learning schedule. I don't know if I should do both. I would talk with your teacher. I would talk with your counselor. I would talk with your parents and kind of see if that's right for you. Unfortunately, some people, they can handle self-learning or algebra 2 and geometry. Like that's perfectly fine. I would say for most people, it's probably not ideal or good. So I would lean against them not doing it, but I don't want to tell you that because I don't know enough about you or, your experience to kind of give you that information. All right. So now let's get into this and I'll see if I can. There we go. Cool. All right. So I'm going to write down some things, go through some of the math. It's been a long time since I did some math. All right. Now, obviously I'm going to believe this is either the correct answer or maybe it's your work. I'm not really sure. Gracie, if you're on, if you want to let me know, that will be very helpful. But yeah, you're going to have a right triangle and we can say A, B, and C. So I'll say C is going to be the hypotenuse. We'll have B is going to be the second leg. And C is going to equal the short leg. Okay, so the hypotenuse of a right triangle is one more than twice the leg of the short leg. So I can say C, the hypotenuse, is equal to, exactly as it has written there, one more. So we could say 2A plus 1. And then the second leg is one less than twice the leg of the shortest leg. So that would be 2A minus 1. And then we have C is obviously equal to A. No, sorry. A is equal to A, right, which is the shortest leg. So if we're going to use this A squared plus B squared equals C squared, then we have A squared, and then for B, that's going to be a 2A minus 1 quantity squared equals a C is 2A plus 1, so that's a 2A plus 1 quantity squared. All right, so now let's go ahead and simplify this out. Let's see. That is going to be a perfect square trinomial. So that will be a 4a squared minus a 8a. Nope, sorry, 4a. So that's if you were to multiply that out, if you were to expand that out, if you need me to do that, let me know. So that'd be a 4a, and then that'd be plus 1. And then over here, that's going to be a 4a squared plus a 4a plus 1. So that is me expanding, multiplying those out. Now we just got to go ahead and, well, these are going to divide out. So that's good. And now let's go and see, those will divide out when subtract out when I get them on both sides. And then I have a squared minus a minus a 4a. So minus an 8a is equal to a 0. I can factor out an a. A times a minus 8 is equal to 0. So we could say a is equal to 0, or we can have an a minus 8 is equal to 0. So a is equal to an 8. Well, obviously, a cannot equal 0 because it's the length of a side. So the lengths here, we have 8. There you go, 15 if you plug them back in. So you have a is equal to an 8. B, that's going to be 2 times 8 minus 1. And C equals a 2 times 8 plus 1. You can see that's how they got the 15 and the 17. So hopefully that makes sense, Gracie. Let me know. Yes, if you have a math question, guys, go to brianmclogan.com/Q&A, and I'll do my best to get to your guys' questions. Any tips, guidelines, book recommendations? Yeah, Gabriel, I see that. Unfortunately, I don't have anything for you. What are the transformations of quadratic graphs? Let's see. I'm not sure how to identify the transformations unless I'm putting this into standard form. I'm sorry. Vertex form. Where did my thing go? There you go. All right, so let's go ahead and put this into vertex form. So this is technically in standard form. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And if you want to identify the transformations, then you want to put it in y equals a times x minus h quantity squared plus k. So to go from here to here, somebody mentioned, hey, can you do a complete in the square? Well, here you go. All right, so to go to completing the square, a couple things we need to know. First, you can't have this negative in front, so we're going to have to factor that number out. So negative 2x squared plus a 5x. So to factor out that number, I am now going to give a negative 2. That's me an x squared, and then minus a 5/2 x. Why? Because negative 2, you cannot factor that out from 5. Well, you can, but you're not going to be able to get an integer. You're going to be getting this fractional here. So negative 2 times x squared minus 5/2 x. And again, multiply everything back out if you don't believe me. Negative 2 times x squared is a negative 2x squared. Negative 2 times a negative 5/2 x is going to be a positive 5. All right, so now what we need to do, though, is find a value c that creates a perfect square trinomial inside these parentheses. How do you find that number that creates that perfect square trinomial? That is going to be c equals a b divided by 2 quantity squared. So c is going to be the value that's going to create that perfect square trinomial. That's what we need to do. So actually, let me do this. So what we're looking for is y equals a negative 2 times x squared minus 5/2 x plus c. So we're looking for this c. c equals b divided by 2 quantity squared. Well, what is our b in this case? A b is our coefficient of x, right? So it's a negative 5/2 divided by 2 quantity squared. Well, divided by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by 5/2, right? So therefore, or divided by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. So that's going to be a negative 5/4 squared is going to be a 25/16. So this is going to be my value c. Now, if I'm adding a c inside this parentheses, I have to also make sure I subtract a c outside the parentheses. So then I have y equals a negative 2 times a x squared minus a 5 halves x plus a 25 over 16 and minus a 25 over 16. And then this is going to be a perfect square trinomial. If you want to look at what the binomial is going to be, just look at whatever b divided by 2 was. So y equals a negative 2 times a x. Since this is negative, your binomial is going to be negative. So it's a negative 5/4 quantity squared minus a 25 over 16. So to answer your question, what are the transformations? This is going to have a reflection about the x-axis as well as a vertical stretch of 2. That comes from these two. It's going to have a shift 5/4 to the right. That's going to come from this one. And then also it's going to have a shift down 25 over 16. So those are your transformations. That's a good one, actually. I like that. Okay, cool. Boom, 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 boom. How do you find the phase shift in trig and radians? For instance, how do you find it from a graph and from a table? That's going to be a little bit more difficult. I'd look at some points from in there, but if you have a question, if you have a specific problem, submit that to brianmclogan.com/Q&A, and I'll be more than happy to see if I can go over it for you. All right. I like that question. Let's do another one. I hope you're doing well. I'm interested in learning how to solve problems by splitting them into components, but don't have much experience with this approach. Do you have any tips or resources for getting started? I really appreciate it. Any advice you can share? I'm not, unfortunately, sure what exactly you mean from there for me to be able to give you some context. I apologize. I don't know how to go about alternating series at this time. It's been way too long. Sorry, I can't do alternating series, at least on the live stream. I need to go back and look at that. Spend all the time. I'll need to go back and look at these theorems for circles. I would be able to, for me to be able to get to that question. So Hanan, sorry about that. I need to go back and review looking at those formulas. I don't have them off the top of my head to go and look for that. Can you solve a whole problem? Whole problem? Maybe just half the problem? Find the distance from the line given the point. Find the distance from the line to the given point. Well, it's kind of confusing. I guess maybe the shortest distance from there. I mean, you have y equals 1 over 6 plus 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's going like that. Oh. And then down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then 2. Make it look like that. And then your point is negative 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 5. So then you'd have to have this point, and then you're going to want to find the intersection point, I believe. So this point's negative 5, 5, and it has to go through that point. And I mean, you can find a distance from either of these 2 points on the graph, but I'm not sure if you're trying to find the perpendicular bisector. I'm not sure, but it doesn't state that. So, if you can give me a little more clarity on what point distance I'm looking for, then that'd be very helpful. So if what's the question? I don't understand the question. I don't even know how to solve it. Shown on the standard XY coordinate plane, the major axis AD, the minor axis BF, the foci are G and H and C and E are on the list. Which of the following relationships is true? AD. I'd have to look at that. I'd have to go back through. CG plus CH equals BF. That's going to take a little bit longer for me to be able to calculate for on this live stream. Sorry about that. Let me go and get through some of your guys' questions if you guys have them. And otherwise, well, awesome, Lazo. So happy to be able to help you out. I mean, the most students usually just have mistakes with the algebra, so make sure you understand the algebra for you on those. I have, and I've seen the video. It's good. Do you know how to do x squared plus 3x plus 5? Well, it's not going to be factorable, so it looks like you're probably going to want to use quadratic formula. You're very welcome, Devin. Happy to help you out. If it takes someone 10 minutes to saw a board in 2 pieces, how long will it take to saw a board in 3 pieces? Well, you're going to have to create an equation, and that's a pretty good one. I'll have to submit that to bremglogan.com/Q&A, and I'll try to do it. Not a question, but thank you for being a better explainer than some of the teachers I've had in college. You really got me through and helped me pass exams. Well, you are very welcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will get to some of these questions. You'll start to see some of them on my channel. And some of them are just, when I have these live streams, I always like to have things submitted ahead of time so I can go through them. But I really appreciate you guys bringing in these questions. And I'm looking forward to doing more and more of these questions as I add these on to my live streams to help you guys out. All right, guys, I am going to head out for the day. Hope you guys have a great week. Cheers.